नामरूपस्य आनन्दो वै स्वभावतः वेदगीता समुद्धर्ता ज्ञानयज्ञव्रते स्थितः चिन्मयं जीवनं यस्य स्मरणं यस्य चेतना ज्ञानदानं धृतिर्यस्य तस्य पादौ भजाम्यहम् समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयम् नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम् प्रापदैश्वर्ययोगात् अगति च गतिमत्तां प्रापदेकं ह्यनेकं विविधविषयधर्मग्राहिमुग्धेक्षणानां प्रणतभयविहन्तृब्रह्म यत्तन्नतोऽस्मि अतीतः पन्थानं तव च महिमा वाङ्मनसयोर् अतद्व्यावृत्यायं चकितमभिधत्ते श्रुतिरपि कस्य स्तोतव्यः कतिविधगुणः कस्य विषयः पदे त्वर्वाचीने पतति न मनः कस्य न वचः Hari Om friends, salutations and welcome to Vichar Sadhana Satsang. We have completed the fifth query, so there is nothing to chant from the fifth session, and we have not yet started on the text proper of the sixth query. So today we won't have anything for chanting the text. So we'll straight away go to the introduction part of this sixth query. We have already covered some 3 paras. To draw your attention, the first paragraph, there's a mention of consciousness in 2 different wordings. The same paragraph, in the beginning it says supreme consciousness. In this discussion, we will find that the supreme consciousness, the Purusha, is indicated not directly but through its expressions and manifestation. This is one statement, important statement. And later we come across another term which says last sentence as the very cause of it all. So the sentence starts from the method of explaining the Purusha is by bringing the entire attention of the student to the manifested symbols of life and thereby indicating that at the core of it all, as a substratum for the entire life, as the very cause of it all, is the vital dynamic center, the all-pervading Purusha. So now there it is, supreme consciousness, the Purusha. Here it is the all-pervading Purusha. So this is a slight difference we need to appreciate in the beginning itself. So when we say it is the supreme Purusha, there is nothing beyond that. Purushanna param kinchit, says Kathopanishad. Indriyebhya, there is a mantra in Kathopanishad while guiding on one's spiritual practice, how one should negate the lower and try to identify the higher. So paraha is used for the thing which is higher and beyond. Indriyebhya parahyarthaha. Subtler than our sense organs is sense objects. Subtler than the sense objects is our mind. अर्थेभ्यश्च परम मनः, मनसस्तु परा बुद्धिः, बुद्धेरात्मा महान् परः, महतः परम अव्यक्तम, अव्यक्तात् पुरुषः परः, पुरुषान्न परम किंचित, सा काष्ठा सा परागतिः। विषय पराकाष्ठा, तो सा काष्ठा सा परागतिः. So Purusha is the highest. Therefore here that highest, which we refer as infinite objectless awareness, that highest is in this world, that is the highest, and there is nothing beyond that. Next to that is this infinite awareness is now entering into the Vayu and manifesting as prana force, which is referred here in this paragraph as life. The word life is referred, which indicates the prana force. Now that consciousness manifests through this Vayu in the lower three words is considered as all-pervading consciousness. What was infinite awareness, or in terms of consciousness, if we have to say, what is pure consciousness is otherwise called as infinite awareness, that when manifest through the medium of Vayu, which is pervading in all the three worlds of Bhurloka, Bhurloka, Svarloka, or here body, mind and intellect. Prana is pervading all the three equipments. So when this is considered, then it is not the total truth or entire infinite awareness. It's only a part of that being manifest. According to the capacity of the equipment, the power will manifest. So electricity is a vast power. It is in a, at the power station, if you see, it is generated and those units are very heavy. To carry that power, we require very heavy cables, for which we have to erect poles, very heavy poles. And it's really, in a big quantity, the power is available, the big measure. But when it comes to our room, step down through step down transformer, etc. When it comes down, in our bedroom, the light is so dim. Now this is in spite of the vast electricity power, it manifests only as a dim light in my bedroom lamp. Now this is not anyway the conditioning or limitations of the power. It is the limitations of the equipment. Whereas in the stadium, if you go, there are floodlights and that gives a light as good as a daylight. So we can play in the night also. So likewise, the manifestation of the power of that supreme power called as a infinite awareness or pure consciousness, this power, when conditioned, when it is manifesting through some conditioning, upadhi, then its manifestation will depend upon the capacity of the conditioning. Itself is limitless. Energies that way, they are really of high dimension, you may say, or dimensionless. They can manifest wherever there is a proper equipment. So here the manifestation is through prana, through Vayu. This was one of the important questions that was asked to Yajnavalkya by none other than Gargi herself. She was also one of the great learned lady and considered as one of the authorities in the court of the king, his court, there are great pandits and wise people, and among them the Gargi was also one of the highest. So when the Yajnavalkya was offered, Janaka wanted a teacher who is not only Shrotriya but Brahmanishta also. So how to identify who is Brahmanishta? That was a great problem for him. So then he played some idea. He declared in the court that whoever is Brahmanishta in this court, for him I have kept 100 cows. Their horns are bedecked with gold. 100 cows are, I am eager to give them. So the one who is that, let him take this away. So now how can one declare that I am a Brahmajnani or I am I have realized this? So everybody kept quiet. And after some time, Yajnavalkya ordered his disciples, hey, collect all those 100 guys and take it to our ashram. Straight away gave the order. So when he gave the order, then all other people there, all those learned people, they stopped him. He said, what do you mean by that? Do you want to claim you are a Brahmajnani? Then answer our questions. And one by one, everyone asked the question and he answered them. Finally, when Gargi came, she said, I'm going to ask him 2 questions. If he can answer that, then definitely we have to accept him. So the first question that she asked was, what is it that pervades all the 3 worlds? And one may tempt to say this all-pervading consciousness, as it is put here. He said Vayu. And that was the last question. One more question she asked, and he answered that, and he took away all those 100 cows. So the point here is that Vayu is pervading all the 3 worlds, the lower 3 worlds, and the consciousness manifest in that Vayu is otherwise called as Prana Shakti. And the domain, therefore, of this Prana Shakti is lower 3 worlds. So this lower 3 worlds is the domain of Prana force, and these 3 worlds are continuously created, continuously destroyed. So they are perishable worlds. This is the domain. And when we were discussing earlier, that we saw we have to be very careful. In Mundaka we saw when it is to be realized by a mind, Chetasa. So when while discussing on that, we said that though the prana force has pervaded body, mind and intellect, that's his domain, still in the very same body, it can be realized by Chetas. So we have to see the demarcation of the prana force operating in all our bodies, 3 bodies, body, mind and intellect, or Bhurloka, Bhurloka or Swarloka. Here it is operating, this is perishable. But beyond this, start the domain where the Mahat is a connecting link between lower 3 and higher 3. From that onwards, we have a link for the upper 3 eternal worlds, imperishable worlds. So that connecting link was actually the important one, where we here say that it is the intelligence in the intellect, and this light of intelligence becomes the link for the upward higher class, higher world. Whereas with the same link, when one gets by mistake of identification, then he goes down the line of intellect, mind, sense organs, body, and he goes out into the world. So this demarcation is indicated here. When here it is written as all-pervading consciousness or all-pervading Purusha, it means the lower 3 worlds pervaded by prana force. On this world, we have in Guru Stotram, we have the words in our regular prayers. Chinmayam Vyapiyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Jena. So that Chinmayam, by this pure consciousness, has pervaded these three worlds. So, as of course, in the form of a prana force. So, this is the life for all the three worlds. The word life is used here in the first paragraph. About this difference between the supreme consciousness, the Purusha, which is only one, and the Purusha as manifest in prana, in Vayu, as prana force, as life, is again the first manifestation. And of course, when we go into the details of the 16 parts or kalas, the first one itself is prana. It starts with prana. And there itself, from that onwards, it goes down to the level of names and forms. So from prana force to names and forms is down the line. And then if we are able to have an accent on consciousness instead of prana force, because that consciousness is available in us as intelligence immediately. So if we can, with that link, if we can connect ourselves to the higher three worlds, then definitely we will be away from the influence of the lower three. Now the system we have to appreciate here, and that we will see as we proceed on in this introduction. So in these two, we have to differentiate between the supreme consciousness and all pervading consciousness. All pervading is basically these three worlds only. This is the world, in fact, in which the jiva does to and fro from the earth to the heaven and back to the earth. So this is the important difference. Then it is said, it is described, this all-pervading Purusha is described as dynamic center. Dynamic center. The dynamism doesn't belong to Vayu. Vayu by itself is inert, one of the five great inert elements. By itself, it cannot do much. But when consciousness is added to that, then that prana force becomes a dynamic center and vital. This vitality or the power that we get due to this vital air sheath is the power, and that is also due to consciousness. So consciousness manifesting through Vayu is a prana force, and this prana force is pervading body, mind, and intellect. They are all perishable, all the lower three worlds, but still in the intellect, there is a link, and that link of intelligence by which we can reach the higher. So now this aspect in the first paragraph I wanted to highlight. Then we will go to the next one. The only method will be practicable in a subjective quest after the divine spark that seems to be out of our cognition. So now the method of this consciousness manifesting in different equipment, starting with prana, this is for those seekers who have almost forgotten this divine spark in us, and therefore they have no experience. Therefore, when they have no experience or idea about this divine spark, the people are the teacher of this Upanishad, when he cannot talk to them in that language of the Supreme Purusha, he will have to talk in a language that is understandable to the student. And that language is talking about that Supreme Purusha as consciousness manifesting through body, mind, and intellect, how it manifests differently. And like a student for whom the color slide was put up there for observation, where he ignores the color in understanding. Similarly, these expressions, manifestations through different equipment, the student will forget the equipment and his attention will be drawn towards the consciousness. So that going by that, he will reach the supreme consciousness. It was the point in this second paragraph. We have seen that. And now coming to the third paragraph. We have seen that the faculties, different faculties of perception, of conception, of discrimination or thinking, and then of intuition. So now, basically, we have seen earlier that this Prashnopanishad is elaboration of Mundakopanishad. So when in the beginning itself, when there in Mundakopanishad, the student approaches the teacher through proper manner and he says, Kasminnu bhagavo vidnyate sarvamidam vidnyatam bhavati iti. Sir, please tell me, please teach me, tell me that knowing which everything else is as well known. Tell me that knowledge by knowing which everything else is as well known. I need not know it separately. Kasminnu vidnyate, kasminnu bhagavo vidnyate, sarvamidam vidnyatam bhavati iti. And to answer to this, he says that dve vidye veditavye. Brahmavido vadanti, paracha aparacha. This is the answer teacher gives. That we need to learn two types of knowledge. The one knowledge is called as aparavidya, and aparavidya is otherwise called as intellectual knowledge, and the other is called as paravidya, which is called as intuitional knowledge. So these two types of knowledge, one is intellectual knowledge called as aparavidya, and the other one is called as paravidya or intuitional knowledge. But now on this itself, we can segregate these 6 queries. The first 3 queries are based on aparavidya, where basically all knowledge, intellectual knowledge related to karma and upasana are considered in the first 3 queries. And 4th, 5th, and 6th, the other 3 are concerned with paravidya, that is how the person can develop this intuitional power of knowledge. So these roughly first 3 queries are related to aparavidya, which deals with karma and upasana, and the result of this upasana, karma and upasana should be dispassion. Parikshalokan karmachitan. We have seen that mantra earlier also. Brahmanaha nirvedam ayat. Nirvedam is dispassion. He must come to that dispassion, which will then qualify him to walk the path of knowledge. So the first 3 queries should make us wiser in our interacting with the outer world or the inner world of thoughts and feelings, that they are finite and they cannot give me the infinite knowledge or infinite bliss. So this idea basically is the one which tells us clearly the difference between aparavidya and paravidya. So here the broad classification is the first 3 queries are dealing with aparavidya, where karma, upasana, and result of upasana as purity of mind, single pointedness of mind, etc., and the resultant dispassion. This much is the gains from karma and upasana. When I say karma, it is definitely karma yoga. not any karma, desire prompted activity. So this particularly is the segregation, and here we are told that similarly the Atman being subtle of the subtle, now that Paravidya is being introduced through the medium of various equipments. So the 16 parts or 16 kalas of this Purusha are nothing but the 16 different manifestations to different upadhis. Out of which the first one is this prana. So now this incidentally we have to go to the details of 16 kalas. But this particularly is a consideration in the third paragraph. We have differentiated the types of knowledge. And now the statement in the same paragraph is that through our intuition, the total truth, which is the very basis on which all the different facets exist and from which they shine in their own glory. So this is the concluding statement of this paragraph, which tells us that through these 16 kalas, we want to reach the Supreme Purusha, the Supreme Consciousness, by overlooking or negating the upadhis, the conditioning, and what is manifest in that? The all-pervasive consciousness. Concentrating on that and reaching through intuition the Supreme Purusha and becoming that. So this is the idea. Now in the fourth paragraph, now we have to see this. Since the comprehension of the reality is possible only through intuitive experiencing, it is the responsibility of the teacher to make the student evolve sufficiently through upasana. That is why we have in all the previous 5 queries very many types of upasanas prescribed. Even in these sections, we found that they were not mere methods of meditation. A lot of philosophical thinking was also doled out to provide sufficient exercise to the upasak's mind and intellect, to help them develop. In short, when we understand it sympathetically, we can say that Jnana Marga, the path of knowledge, consists of a happy synthesis of both the intense technique of bhakti, devotion, and the philosophical contemplation prescribed in Vedanta. The student is meant to practice upasana hand in hand with regular doses of philosophical contemplation. Now, the first aspect of this paragraph, where we have seen that the comprehension of the reality possible through intuition, and it is the responsibility of the teacher to make the student evolve sufficiently. So evolution is the important word here. There is no evolution without involution. And this involution is starting from prana down the line to the names and forms. So now, through this involution, we have come down to the level of a living creature. As a living creature, I am self-conscious, but the self that I am conscious of is by mistake considered as body. And therefore, for such a person of mistaken identification, he has come down to the depth of involution. Now he needs to evolve from that, from the level of a limited being because of his mistake of identification with BMI. Now he wants to evolve it to the all-pervasive consciousness and then to the supreme consciousness. So here these two terms are used here. one term used here is evolve sufficiently through upasana. This is one. And secondly, we have seen here that intellect, the upasak, the teacher, sufficient, a lot of philosophical thinking was also doled out to provide sufficient exercise to the upasak's mind and intellect to help them develop. The development of the equipments, mind and intellect, is one aspect. And with the help of these developed equipments, to evolve on the part of individual, evolution on the part of individual is another consideration. So for that, see, the whole system is that Supreme Purusha, who is independent of all these lower things, has become manifest in Vayu as prana force, and that is the starting point of descent, descending, going down. From that onwards, it has come down to the level of name and form, or all these individuals, for us, all the living individuals, human mind. So it has come to that level. This is the descent. Descent of what? Apparent descent of consciousness. The supreme consciousness, infinite consciousness, has become the all-pervading consciousness. Then it has become the egoistic consciousness or individual jiva chaitanya, egoistic consciousness. Egoistic consciousness has become the perceiver, feeler, thinker consciousness. It has gone to the level of body consciousness, and then finally to the level of names and forms. All forms are illumined by that consciousness. So see now, this is the descent of consciousness. We are discussing independently based on those words that are there in this: evolution, development, etc. So now, before I evolve, why I have to evolve? Because I am at this level, which at the almost the down, the depth of degradation or depth of the involution, we can say. So this involute has to now evolve to become full and complete. For this, he needs the equipments of mind and intellect. Then mind and intellect are maintained by the prana force. Therefore, prana force is also required to make it operative. And then I have to develop these equipment. Yesterday or day before yesterday, we thought, what is the development of equipments in terms of maturity of the mind and the sattvic disposition of mind. On this, on the intellectual level, it is a discriminative faculty, intensifying the discriminative faculty. All this is the development of equipment. So such a developed equipment, with this, I can back up by upasana. I can have Vedantic exercises of contemplation. So the philosophical doses are doled out along with the upasana. If you see the guided meditation by Swamiji, you see that he starts with some japa or some bhajan. So this is of a saguna upasana. Some Lord Shiva or Vishnu. On some he will have the japa. Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namah Shivaya. So this is Saguna Upasana. We'll start with that to quieten the mind, to make the mind silent, to make the mind withdraw from the outer world. When the mind is withdrawn from the outer world completely, then it becomes a quiet mind or calm mind. And this mind is then taken up for upasana. So then, in the beginning, the japa is done, japa is taken up of any deity. He would take different deities and then make the mind peaceful. See, these are the two levels. Making the mind quiet when it is free from the outer world of objects. Giving it the technique, applying the technique of Japa Yoga for the mind, and it will be further, it will become peaceful. So from a quiet mind to a peaceful mind, or from a calm mind to a serene mind, which is tending to be sattvic. So this is achieved first by the Saguna Upasana. So here Upasana is being capitalized for preliminary tuning up of the mind, making it quiet and peaceful, or calm and serene. These are the different sets of terms used by Swamiji for this. And then give the exercise of Vedantic contemplation. This exercise is based on the intense discrimination between self and the not self. So intellectual discrimination is being intensified, and the mind tuned up through Upasana is made quiet and peaceful, and this will result in mind itself being merged with the deity in all devotion. So then the mind will be only a devoted mind. It has already identified with the deity, become one with that. But such a devoted mind, peaceful and devoted mind, is required for Vedanta sadhana. Here Swamiji, when he says that we require both the happy synthesis of both the intense technique of bhakti, devotion, and the philosophical contemplation prescribed in Vedanta. We are trying to make use of both. And that's why upasanas were prescribed in Upanishads also, in this also. We have got complete fifth query is based on Omkar Upasana, which is meant for Saguna Upasana as well as Nirguna, where both the aspects are covered. So here the first part of the meditation is tuning the mind, making it quiet and peaceful, and when it is merged with the deity that it is worshipping, then that mind is soaked with devotion, is now available for further treatment, that is Vedantic contemplation. Now this contemplation is not done by the mind. Mind has to keep quiet. It is peaceful now, but full of devotion. Now the mind has to closely follow the steps taken by the intellect in search of the Supreme by the exercise of discrimination of not self and negating it. This is what is going on at the level of intellect. So intellect is searching for the supreme or the ultimate truth or reality, and for that he needs a intense discrimination. So mind has to closely follow whatever are the discoveries of the intellect, whatever it has so far negated the not self, and to that extent the self has become or revealed to that degree, then mind has to identify with that. A devoted mind, closely following the exercise of the intellect, following the steps of the intellect, and whatever is discovered by the intellect through discrimination, trying to identify with it. So the mind is with the intellect. This is the integration aspect. And mind itself is peaceful, quiet and peaceful. This is a concentration aspect. Mind is now single-pointedly available with devotion to go along with the intellect. And the intellect is applying the discriminative exercise and negating what the self is not. This is the process of Vedantic contemplation. So here mind's full support is required, and mind is already trained to be peaceful, quiet, concentrated, single pointed, and with devotion. Such an equipped mind, when following the steps of the intellectual search, then that exercise, backed up by upasana and with the doses of Vedantic contemplation, then it goes on. So Swamiji, while demonstrating or what you can call it as guided meditation, he starts with the japa. He increases the frequency of chanting the japa. He increases the volume and lowers it. And by that way, he makes the mind fully engaged with what it is doing at present, the japa. And then afterwards, slowly reducing the volume, the frequency, and lying down to a silence. When the silent mind has become silent, here the Swamiji's instruction for that is make the mind silent and watch the silence. Very important instruction. When the mind has become silent, we are not with the mind. This is an exercise given to the mind. And when mind has become silent or peaceful, then watch that silence. Watching the silence is to become the silence, the sense of identification. This is the nature of the mind. It is called tadakara vritti. So if the surroundings are like a marketplace, buzzing with sounds and shrieks, etc., mind also will become to that nature. When mind goes to the temple, surrounding peaceful area and surroundings, the mind also tends to be peaceful. So whatever the mind thinks of, it tends to become of that nature. Naturally, when the mind is contemplating upon, with the help of Vedantic exercise, upon the nature of the self, which is discovered by discriminative faculty, the mind is trying to identify with it. It becomes silent because basically the self is silence and mind is silent. With this exercise of contemplation, then mind readily one with the intellect, closely following the intellect with devotion, that kind of developed instrument is a great help or aid for the contemplative exercise. And this leads to, we have seen earlier, that this intense discrimination leads to the power of intuition, by which one experiences the Supreme Purusha. So here it is, important point that we have discussed here is basically the, what is called, we can call it as the Acharya in his Bhashya has called it that avastha and utkranti. These are the two terms he has used. Avastha and utkranti. By avastha, ava means lower. And how the consciousness has come down to the lower levels till it reaches the level of names and forms. This is avastha, various avasthas of consciousness. And now utkranti is evolution. How from that name and form, it will go back to become infinite consciousness. Because behind the name and form is only the expression of consciousness. Now from the expression of consciousness to the very consciousness is the idea here. So the student, while listening to the master who is expressing it in terms of its expression, manifestation in the equipment, he will overlook the equipment and catch the consciousness. So thus the student will be guided to reach and realize the Supreme Purusha, the infinite consciousness. So this is the basic idea in this. When the terms used here, evolve sufficiently, the student has to evolve sufficiently, then provide the sufficient exercise to the upasak's mind and intellect to help them develop. So we require the developed equipments for the Vedantic sadhana, and these developed equipments are possible with the help of upasana. So this prepares us for the Vedanta sadhana. And these two are I consider as important. So the upasana qualifies the seeker to walk the path of knowledge. And finally, it is the knowledge that liberates the individual from the sense of bondage. So this idea is suggested in the fourth paragraph mainly, and the important terms we saw already. The comprehension of the reality is possible through intuitive exercise. Here we have to see total comprehension. Otherwise, if you take the mere word comprehension, we know that it is intellectual comprehension, and there is another word as apprehension. The apprehension is without the use of any equipment, whereas the comprehension is with the help of mind and intellect or intellect. So this difference being there, we will take this because since it is said that the comprehension of the reality is possible only through intuitive experiencing, it means the total comprehension by the intellect. So this total will include the apprehension as well. So it means that the para and apara both are covered in this. The intellectual knowledge free from doubts and perversions itself will be qualified for the intuitional experience. So this particular step-by-step understanding is required. When we are saying comprehension, it is total comprehension. All the capacities of the intellect. Capacity of the intellect is comprehension and apprehension. Comprehension first through intellectual knowledge or aparavidya. First, intellectually we will try to understand without any confusion, doubt, the nature of the reality. And the other aspect is the reality or the truth is to be apprehended in the intense heat of meditation. So this apprehension happens when one transcends the intellect. So the intellectual domain has to be transcended in order to have the intuitional experience. So this aspect is suggested in the fourth paragraph. This is, after all, an introduction to the sixth query. We are not discussing any details about it, but basic concepts behind its sixth query are covered in the in this introduction part of it. Now there is any other important mark, philosophical. So meditation and contemplation, here the difference is very clear. Meditation is considered as upasana, and which is of saguna deity, the deity with name and form, etc., and qualities. And this prepares the mind in terms of its purity, in terms of its single pointedness, in terms of its devotion, and in terms of its surrender to the deity. So this aspect is useful and qualifies the seeker to walk the path of knowledge. This was also indicated in this paragraph. So we can say Chintana, we can say for this, the Upasana, the meditation is called as Chintanam. And in case of Vedantic sadhana, Nididhyasanam. It is called as Nididhyasanam. Nidhi stands for Nija or the self. You are now intensely seeking the real meaning of I. Who is this I? The self. So this seeking intensely is Nididhyasanam. Dhyasa is an intense longing and searching. So this is the Vedantic sadhana. Finally, he concentrates all his efforts in trying to search the, what we are discussing here is Nididhyasanam, trying to seek the self, the I. He has been using the word I am all right, but he has been using it in a wrong way. Right from body onwards, he has been mistaking himself or I or subject to be. Now, on the path of knowledge, he is now very much concerned, and therefore the intense discrimination to discard what is discriminated as not self and assert the self. So in this process, it's called as Nididhyasanam, the Vedantic meditation, so to say. And the Upasana, when you say, it is Chintanam. So Chintanam has got a great scope about deities, the life and the work of deity or its different miracles or those stories, etc. and different qualities of the deity. All this is covered in the Upasana or meditation. Whereas in Vedantic sadhana, it is called as Nididhyasanam, and Swamiji has given the term as contemplative exercise. So this is another terms that we have come across in this fourth paragraph. Now we come to the fifth paragraph, the last one in the introduction. Ultimately, this section is addressed to those who have understood the earlier 5 sections and have practiced intelligently the methods of meditation prescribed so far. Then alone will they be able to start on the pilgrimage of subjective quest as indicated in this bold and courageous scheme of inquiry. We are going through deeper inquiry in this sixth one, and the method of inquiry is the manifestation of consciousness in different parts. There are 16 parts, and how it is described. At one side, we are saying Tad Brahman Nishkalamaham. So the Atma, the Brahman is Nishkalam, partless. It is partless. And here it is described as having 16 parts. So this appears to be contradiction, but there is no contradiction. It is the avidya that has made us see through different or 16 equipment, so to say, 16 media, and seeing through that media, we are seeing the consciousness differently because of its different manifestation. So now, seeing the manifestation, we want to apprehend that which is unmanifest and infinite, free from any conditioning. So this is the last exercise that is given in the sixth query, and here it is expected that whatever we have so far read, discussed, and understood, and there are some practical exercises given in each query called as Upasana. We are expected to cover all these aspects, these exercises, so that we will be better qualified to go through the sixth query. This was the aspect here. Now, before proceeding to the text proper, I would like to know if there are any questions. Yes.
Guruji, role of a quiet and peaceful and single pointed mind है खूब clear है. But रोल ऑफ डिवोशन हे एक्झॅक्टली कसं कसं कळतं की व्हॉट डज डिवोशन रिअली एनेबल द माइंड टू डू आणि डिवोशन नसलं तर काय काय होतं?
Devotion belongs to heart, whereas the knowledge belongs to the head. First aspect, or mind and intellect. If you head and heart, or mind and intellect. Now, it starts with a sense of liking. I like this. I don't like that. Starting with this, the mind starts its liking with certain idea. तुकाराम महाराज आहे, तुका म्हणे मला अवघ्याचा कंटाळा, तुका म्हणे मज अवघ्याचा कंटाळा, तू एक गोपाळा आवडसी. I like you. See, this is one aspect. Avod. So this is the devotion starts with the sense of liking. Mind must like it. Mind must be interestingly involved in it. So this kind of interest of the mind is the beginning of this. Now what has happened is, at present, I like so many things in this world, starting from my own people, of my close relations, my close friends. I got the liking and love for my property. For various things I have at present, I have invested, so to say, my like and love for the worldly things. Now here it is not that kind of devotion that is expected. Basically, devotion is a better term, is a higher term. Love and devotion are almost same with a slight difference. And interest is something below that. You start liking something. So this is the beginning of that. This liking becomes love when it is without any expectation and without expecting anything in return or a response, just a selfless love. And it can be with your friend, it can be with your wife, it can be with your dog, it can be with anything. Selfless. Don't expect from its response or accordingly the response from the other end, whether it gives or not. But love. This is a tendency of the mind to love, and to love selflessly and love for the love's sake and not for anything in return. This tendency we do have, and we express it with many times, mostly with our friends. The friendship, earlier we say the friend in need is friend indeed, etc. All right, but the love with our friend is really the greatest love among the relations. Perhaps some persons, being bachelor, they may not know, they may be deprived the joys of a married life. A woman who is barren, who doesn't know what is the love of a child for the mother. There are like this, so many people are deprived of that. But there is no one who has no friend, and the friendship and the love with the friend gives him the maximum. Here, there is nothing short of it. So, friendship, if it is lost, then it is no more a friendship. It cannot be called as real friendship. it must have some other purposes. Friendship always lasts. It is not lost. So that kind of love and friendship is the best in the relationships. All other relationships are something or the other, we can say, lacking. But here, one is really happy with the friendship. Now, what we have seen is the feeling of love, which can be selflessly, it can be with anyone, it can be love with anything, selflessly. When this feeling of love is directed towards the higher, in case of love, there is no higher and lower. I can love anyone and selflessly. There is no level seen, whether it is higher or lower. But when the feeling of love is directed towards the higher, then it is called devotion. So love and devotion, see the difference. The feeling is same, selfless, dedicated, love. But when the love is directed for the higher level, what is higher level? Now see, I cannot say I am devoted to my wife. I can say I love my wife. All right. I love my dog, etc. But when it comes to my parents, Matru Bhakti, Pitru Bhakti, Desha Bhakti, this is all love directed for the higher purpose. Same feeling of love, but when directed towards the higher purpose, then it becomes devotion. This is one aspect. Liking, love, and devotion. Point is, here we are talking about the mind with devotion who are tuned up with the deity of Upasana and has become one with it. And at present, we find that our love is already, we have already given our entire things in different objects, in different relations, in different things and beings. We have already gone that. How to come from that side to this side is another consideration. But now here, one thing we have seen, that liking is flared into love, and when love directed for the higher purpose is called as devotion. This is one thing is clear. Now, how do you measure the love? Point is this. We say tons of love and all that, that's all really meaningless. We cannot measure love. Love is measured by one's sense of identification with the beloved. How do we measure? When my beloved is miserable, I am miserable. In his happiness, I am happy. When he is not happy, how can I be happy? So this sense of identification with my beloved is the measure of love. How much you love? When it comes to this, you withdraw, then it is not love. So they see this idea to be one with the object of love. To what extent you identify? When it is a total identification, it is the perfect love. So this is, we can say, the love is measured in terms of identification of the lover with the beloved. So this is the measure. Now, the Upasaka, when he says devotion, his attempt is to become one with the Lord. Upasya, Upasaka. At this moment, there are two. And Upasaka, he has all salutations and all praises, etc. for the Lord. This is the beginning of devotion, called as, like there we saw Para and Apara. Here also there is Apara Bhakti. In Apara Bhakti, the devotee is different, the Lord is different. And the devotee praises the Lord, devotee takes the name of the Lord, but devotee never says, I am the Lord. This is the beginning of devotion, apara bhakti. But the climax of devotion is reached, which is called as para bhakti, where devotee once for all, riding at a moment on the wave of devotion, he surrenders totally to the Lord and becomes one with the Lord. This particularly his identity and becoming one with the Lord is called as para bhakti. Apara bhakti is where devotee and the Lord are different. And his attempt is to, all the time, his concern is Vishayato Tyanza Dhala Narayana. So likewise, their object is same, my Upasya, deity. But in the beginning, he considered it as great, Lord is great, and I'm a little individual under his care. So he will take the name of the Lord, praise the Lord, etc. But this should, in its progress, must reach a one state wherein in the intense devotion or love for the Lord, riding on that wave of devotion, he immediately surrenders totally to the Lord and becomes one with the Lord. This kind of devotion is called as Parabhakti. And Vedanta and Parabhakti are not different. They are same. Swamiji is trying to indicate this idea in this last paragraph, where it is said the fourth paragraph. We have read the concluding statements. The in short means summary of the fourth para. When we understand it sympathetically, we can say that Jnana Marga, the path of knowledge, consists of a happy synthesis of both the intense technique of bhakti, devotion, and the philosophical contemplation prescribed in Vedanta. Now here intense bhakti is upasana, where the Lord is different, devotee is different. This is now at this level expected from the mind. And from the intellect, the exercises that are recommended by Vedanta for contemplation. So these are the two things. When they grow, on one side, from devotion side, the devotee will become one with the Lord. It's same as, with the help of intellect, intensifying the discrimination of not self and negating it, and reach the self and becomes the self. These two levels are not different. They are the same. You start with love. Very important point. Incidentally, we are reaching in the, because of this question. You start with the path of devotion and become one in knowledge. Other way, you start with the study of the scriptures. This is not Dhyana Yoga. Study of the scriptures is not Dhyana Yoga. At present, you are trying to understand the scriptures, learn the scriptures, and trying to know what are the important thoughts there, etc. Start with the study of the scriptures, develop a love for the subject matter of your study, and then it goes into a devotion which does not separate him from the goal. So only these two things are to be achieved in life: the love and the knowledge or truth, the reality and the love. One of the publication, Nisargadatta Maharaj, the title of the book is Atma Prema. Atma Prema. He has made self and the love as one. What is called reality in Vedanta, as pure infinite consciousness, is otherwise called as love on the path of devotion. How the love is possible unless you appreciate some common denominator. Our bodies are not same. Body shape, size, color, everything is different. Our minds and likes and dislikes are not same. Our intellectual understanding is not same. But the consciousness in me, in you, and in all others is one and the same. Therefore, this common link, common denominator among all of us is the way we feel the most intimacy that is expressed by love. So there cannot be any other relationship in appreciation of this common denominator than love. And that love is something spontaneous, not really motivated by any purpose. So we meet others, we meet as if we are meeting our own self. So when we say Hari Om, we are closing these hands like Namaskar, and we are saying that the self in you and self in me are one and the same. So this kind of. When you say Harihi Om, Harihi stands for the reality at the total level, and Om stands for Kutastha Atma in the individual. Harihi and Om also is same. Whatever is there as Kutastha Sakshi Atma within the self in the innermost recesses of the intellect, this self is same as the self everywhere. The reality in the totality is same as the reality in the individuality. So the individual self is respected by the represented by the symbol Om, and the reality in entire universe is represented by Harihi, the Lord, the Creator, the Lord. So these two are also one. Madatma Sarva Bhutatma. This idea, this self in all is the self in me. Therefore, this appreciation, Harihi stands for the principle or the reality that pervades the entire universe, entire creation. And Om is the symbol representing the innermost self. They are one. And as we have said, the consciousness in me and consciousness in you is the only common denominator. Rest all, at all other different levels, we are different. And in spite of all differences, if we can love, it is not possible without this understanding of a common denominator. Our consciousness is common in all names and forms. It is inside, outside. Therefore, in all living beings, that is why the saints have said this particular, taken up this matter and says, whoever I meet, he is the Lord for me. So this idea is based on the common denominator. So now what we have seen is that love is a natural emotion in the mind. Mind first likes something, then it develops a love for it, and liking and love are different. Liking is only the beginning of love, and you may also dislike it. We don't know if the mind's vagaries are followed, then mind may dislike also what we like earlier. But when mind consistently likes it, and love is developed. And the love is something selfless, and it's just love for love's sake. This is Vivekananda's words: work for work's sake, duty for duty's sake, love for love's sake. Don't expect anything in return. Even before he says thank you, you disappear from the scene. Do something, whatever you have to do for others. So this kind of idea, you see, love for love's sake, it is selfless. And it can be with anyone. Anyone you really love. It could be anyone. But when this feeling of love is raised for the higher than this petty egoistic individuality, my parents, my nation, my country, my society, then it is called devotion. He is devoted to that. So devotion for the higher, devotion for, so all this devotion is only the love directed for the higher. Thus we can see here in Vedantic sadhana, on the part of mind, it is expected with devotion. Devotion has come out of its capacity to identify with Upasya, the deity that it is worshipping, and this identity is the measure of its devotion and love for the Lord. So with this devotion in mind, the mind is closely following the discoveries of the intellect and identifying with that. So this idea is a Vedantic sadhana. Here, backed up by Upasana, which equips the mind, and the Vedanta has already got exercises of contemplation for the intellect, and this contemplation is based on discrimination between self and not self. So that is what we can say about the devotion aspect. Now all these qualities of the mind are clear. The quiet mind, the peaceful mind, and the devoted mind. The extreme of this is mind becomes totally silenced. So all these equipments disappear into the reality. Because the fact was, the reality was manifest through mind and intellect. Mind as feelings, sankalpa, etc. Through intellect, the consciousness expresses discrimination, discerning, determination. These are all manifestations of consciousness only, nothing else. Otherwise, intellect or mind by themselves are made up of 5 great elements, and they are inert and insentient by themselves. But when consciousness manifests through them, then they manifest. The fan is only a junk of iron, but when electricity flows, then it is not just iron, it is a fan. Then it gives me some function. So likewise, we can, devotion of the mind and discrimination of the intellect has to go together. And on the part of individual as a mind as a subtle body, only 2 keywords are to be remembered. One is concentration and other is integration. These are the 2 keywords in which mind is available with all its concentration, devotion, etc., upasana, and integration we will see the rational aspect and the emotional aspect of the mind, total mind, subtle body. They must be integrated. Not that mind is engaged and interested in one aspect, one sort of pursuit, and the intellect is interested in another kind of pursuit. Not that kind of thing. Arjuna samatva chittate echidarna sara yogate eta mana ani buddhite aikya athi. So integration of mind and intellect is a keyword. And on part of the mind, it is concentration of the mind. Vivekananda has described volumes on this regarding the concentration of the mind. He says, if I were to learn again, then I will not touch any textbook. I'll first learn to concentrate my mind. And then wherever I concentrate, that knowledge becomes mine. And then he gives also the example of the shell in which a raindrop in the Swati constellation becomes a pearl. So he says, there is a limit up to which you can read this, read that, study this, study that, listen to this Swamiji, that Swamiji. All this is going on. But then finally, you must pin down to one thought. Take that to your heart, and entire life you spend on that. Like that shell who keeps afloat to receive that drop of raindrop, Moment it receives it, close-ups, goes to the bottom and it becomes the pearl out of that drop. That's a story. So likewise, you may in the beginning scan everything and see what is appealing to you, etc. Once you have pinned down that this is something is is really close to my heart, so then take it up and thereafterward, whether good or bad, both of them you leave and only work on that idea throughout your life. This is what is called as the pursuit in Vedanta. So follow one thing up to the end. Don't take too many things. Finally, you have to cut down. No? You have discussed so many Upanishads. You have discussed the chapters of the Gita. You have discussed Prakaran Granthas. Finally, what you want to take it out of this? What is your understanding? What is the minimum that you will take and on which you will work throughout the rest of the life? So this is a power of mind, concentration. Now, diverge attention has to be reduced and converged into one topic, one idea, and then work out that. That idea is capable of reaching you to the ultimate. So this is the best because the consciousness is present everywhere. So a given thought which you like the most, which appeals to you the most, and if you work on it, the thought will reveal its essential nature as consciousness. Therefore, this path of devotion from the mind, contemplative exercise of Vedanta, together the seeker is bound to reach the goal. Yes. Now.
Discrimination मध्ये self and not self. So what is the can have any examples that this is self and this is not self? What are the things there in the
example?
In the not self example.
So complete Atma Shatakam will give you example that first 5 verses are the not self. Mano buddhi ahankara chittane naham nacha prana saudhyo, etc. Name raga dvesham, etc. All these first 5 verses discuss of what is not self. And the last verse, aham nirvikalpo nirakaram ekam, etc. The last 6th verse of Atma Shatakam is what I am. So this is assertion and the earlier is negation. Negation of what I am not. So this has to be understood and negated, discriminated and negated. So how I cannot be the mind? I have to reflect on that and ascertain that this is not self, and thereafterward my concern is to rediscover the self. And Shastra says that self is ever present. Now also it is Nitya Upalabdha. It is now also available, but you are not available. Why you are not available? Because your intellect is veiled by the ignorance, avidya, and therefore the mind has become restless and is agitated. And in these conditions, you will never realize the self. So make the mind quiet and peaceful, all turbulence gone, and the purity attained, the reflection will be clear of the self. So this basically body, mind, intellect is not self, and the consciousness within is the self. Shortened, body, mind, not self, and self as pure consciousness or witness consciousness is the reality. So only 3 things are there for us to discriminate: body, mind, and the self. In that, the body can be objectified, the mind can be objectified. It is by process of objectification. The moment you objectify, it is not self, because self is the subject. So the process of objectification is not the body known to you, the conditions of the body known to you. Yes, that means it is an object of your knowledge. Therefore, you cannot be the object of knowledge. You are the very subject. Therefore, body is not the self. Negated. Are you not aware of the conditions of the mind? Whether mind is sorrowful or happy, peaceful or disturbed? You know the conditions of the mind. Therefore, mind and its states becomes the object of your knowledge, object of your awareness. Therefore, they are the object. You want to see the subject. Therefore, negate the object. Likewise, the process of objectification has to be continued till you come to a state where you reach the subject which is not subject to objectification. That is the self. Self cannot be objectified. Finally, when you keep on objectifying, a state will come when you alone will remain. I am. Now, I am cannot be the object. I am the subject. And rest all were relative I ams, but later on, when objectified, they lost that I am sense. The eyes are seeing the forms. So, eyes is the subject, forms and colors are the object. But eyes are objectified by the mind. Mind knows the condition of eyes do not know. So, the mind becomes the subject and the sense organs becomes the object. The mind is objectified by the intellect, to be precise. The intellect knows the condition of mind. Mind doesn't know what is intellect. It's subtler. So, mind becomes the subject, intellect becomes the subject, mind becomes the object. And finally, consciousness knows everything else. So, from intellect onwards, intellect, mind, sense organs, body, prana force, everything is objectified by consciousness. Consciousness is conscious of all the rest. So, and consciousness cannot be objectified. There you stop. When the process stops, when you are no more able to objectify, then what is left out is the subject. All other subjects are relative subjects because they are subject to objectification. Thus, when you reach a state where you cannot objectify anymore, then you are that subject or the self. So this is, by this way, you can differentiate between self and not self. If you are able to be objectified, or if you are aware of something, conscious of something, means that is not you. That is an object of your consciousness. So I am conscious of, I am conscious of. Now think, I am conscious of the outer world. I am conscious of the body and sense organs. I am conscious of the likes and dislikes of my mind. I am conscious of the knowledge and ignorance in my intellect. I am conscious of all of them. Therefore, all of them are objects of my consciousness. Now think a little on a subtler level. When I say I am conscious of this, I am conscious of that, my content must be consciousness. This is very simple and clear. When we go step by step, it becomes clear. When I say I am aware of this, I am aware of that, my contents are awareness. When I say I know this, I know that, my contents are knowledge. So this knowledge, the consciousness or awareness is the self, and rest all are the not self. That's what we can say. So we'll stop here with any announcement. Yasya prasadadahameva Vishnu मय्येव सर्वं परिकल्पितं च इत्थं विजानामि सदात्मरूपं तस्याङ्घ्रिपद्मं प्रणतोऽस्मि नित्यं तस्याङ्घ्रिपद्मं प्रणतोऽस्मि नित्यम् ॐ श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरवे नमः। Hari Om.
Hari Om, sir.